Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's take a look at today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to take up. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen a total of 7 articles that will help us cover 6 topics. Because under the first topic, there are 2 columns on page number 6 and 7. We are going to discuss this topic in detail, which is related to the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Apart from these 2 articles, we have few more articles important for our prelims and mains, and let's cover all these topics one by one and as comprehensively as possible. If you guys are benefiting from our daily Hindu analysis, do support us with your likes, with your comments, share the video with other aspirants as well, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start, we have a very important announcement regarding some of the sessions that we have planned for today on our YouTube channel and as well as on the Unacademy app. Today at 7 p.m., right here on our YouTube channel, we are going to discuss and analyze the mock test number 3 under Unacademy All India Prelims mock test. I hope all of you have attempted the test yesterday. The test was conducted on 2nd of June. So today evening at 7 p.m., all our educators are going to come together to discuss the most important questions from mock test number 3. So do join us live right here on our YouTube channel. And as part of Conquer Prelims, which is still continuing on the Unacademy app, today Asta ma'am will take up the second session for India Yearbook at 6 p.m. So the best way to access these classes would be to join our Telegram channel. You can scan the QR code or search for Unacademy IAS English. Right before these sessions go live, we share the link on our Telegram channel and you can just click on them to watch these classes. So with this, let's begin with today's discussion and look at this important column on page number 6. And even on page number 7, we have a related article. Both these columns are related to the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Because yesterday, the 2nd of June, marked the 10th anniversary of bifurcation of these 2 states. In 2014, the Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act was passed by the Parliament, which led to the creation of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana as 2 separate states, with Hyderabad being the joint capital. So these columns are exploring some important issues related to the bifurcation and the impact left behind by the bifurcation. For example, this column on page number 6 is mainly focused upon the political, economic and social implications of the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh that was done 10 years ago. Next, we have a column on page number 7 that talks about the issues that have been created, the challenges that have emerged due to the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So let's examine this in slight detail, but first we need the background. So if you look at the erstwhile state of Andhra Pradesh, the united state of Andhra Pradesh that was created in 1953, which was later reorganized in 1956 based on the recommendations of the State Reorganization Commission. It was clearly a linguistic state that had been formed. In fact, Andhra, which was set up in 1953, would become the first linguistic state of India, even before the Fazal Ali Commission or State Reorganization Commission's recommendations were implemented in 1956. Prior to that, Andhra had been carved out of the Madras presidency, which comprised of the Rayalaseema region and coastal Andhra region, to establish the state of Andhra. By 1956, based on Fazal Ali Commission's recommendations, which recommended the linguistic reorganization of India, parts of Telangana, which belonged to the Nizam of Hyderabad, was also merged with Andhra to create Andhra Pradesh. But ever since Andhra Pradesh was established in 1956, there has always been an internal divide amongst the Telugu-speaking people. Even though Telugu-speaking people dominate the different regions, right? You're looking at the united map of Andhra Pradesh prior to 2014, prior to the bifurcation. So be it in the Hyderabad, Telangana region, be it in the Rayalaseema region over here or in coastal Andhra, right? You find a linguistic feature which binds the people of the region together, which is the Telugu language, which was the determining factor, in fact, to establish Andhra in 1953. But now the writer raises a very valid question. Now that Andhra Pradesh has been bifurcated and the Telugu community has been split, what are the implications? Does it have any larger implications for the rest of the country? Because don't forget, most states in India were organized on linguistic lines in 1956 as per the recommendations of Fazal Ali Commission. So the writer is questioning, has the time come to re-examine and introspect about the reorganization of India? If such demands could come up from the Andhra Pradesh region and if it could lead to the bifurcation, would similar demands come up in other linguistic states? Because the linguistic reorganization of India was based on the assumption that creating language-based states, using language as a basis for internal reorganization, right? It was seen as fulfilling a practical administrative purpose while maintaining the internal unity of the nation. So now the question here is, if the Telugu-speaking people went for a bifurcation and right now they are living at peace with the bifurcation which has happened, right? The writer points out that there has been no animosity as such between the Telugu community in Andhra Pradesh and the Telugu community in Telangana. Most people have largely moved on from what happened in 2014, because if you remember the bifurcation or if you have heard about it, Telangana was created largely through a violent process, through a very chaotic process. There were large-scale protests in Hyderabad and in Telangana region demanding the creation of Telangana. These protests turned violent as well under the leadership of the TRS and its leader, K. Chandrasekhar Rao. So eventually the then UPA government dealt with the crisis that had engulfed Andhra Pradesh and went ahead to reorganize the state in 2014, leading to the bifurcation of the two states. So given this chaotic environment in which it was created, it was expected that there would be some degree of animosity between the people of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, but that hasn't happened. But however, there are clear differences in the political, economic and social demands of the people of Telangana and people of Andhra Pradesh. So that is the reason why the writer is raising this important question. Has the time come to re-examine the linguistic reorganization of India? If a Telugu-speaking state, which was the first linguistic state of India, could get split despite having a common factor binding them, what will stop such tendencies from developing in other states? Because from Tamil Nadu to Kerala to Karnataka to Assam to West Bengal, most of these states, even Punjab for that matter, they were created on the basis of language. So the writer is raising a very valid question. Linguistic reorganization of India, which was done in 1956, has it become an outdated concept? Are there other important factors that we need to keep in mind to ensure that the internal unity of India is maintained while satisfying the grievances and the demands of the people from different regions of the country? So let's explore this idea a little further. Let's look at this in slight detail. Now again, we'll have to go back in history to understand this particular point. So let's look at the brief history of this particular region, which is today's Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. See, historically, let's say even before colonial rule, from the Golconda region, which is near today's Hyderabad and Telangana, till all the way till the Chittoor region and coastal belt of today's Andhra Pradesh, this whole region was largely governed historically in medieval times, let's say, by one empire or one kingdom. So internally there has usually been political, economic and social unity. But the rise of the princely state of Nizam, the Nizam of Hyderabad, would alter the equations here. The Nizam would eventually cede some of the territories of the Telugu-speaking area. The Nizam would cede areas of Rayalaseema and coastal Andhra to the British, while retaining control only over the Hyderabad region, which largely today is the Telangana region. So this division, which happened under the princely state of Nizam of Hyderabad during the colonial rule, did create a political split. But however, it didn't have much of a social impact. As I said, the Telugu-speaking people never had animosity just because they were from different regions. By and large, the cultural unity had been maintained. Then post-independence, things would change again. Because during colonial rule, this entire region, Rayalaseema and coastal Andhra, had been made part of the Madras Presidency. Nizam of Hyderabad had retained the status of Hyderabad as a princely state, but coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema were part of Madras Presidency. So post-independence, there was a massive movement in the early 1950s led by a legendary leader from Andhra, Potti Sriramulu. Potti Sriramulu went on a fast unto death, went on a hunger strike, and eventually sacrificed his life as well. This triggered large-scale protests in the Telugu-speaking areas, which pushed the Indian government to establish the first linguistic state of India. That was Andhra. By carving out Rayalaseema and coastal Andhra from Madras Presidency, the first linguistic state of India was established. Now, this was very, very significant because just few years prior to this, before 1953, there were two committees that had been set up after independence to examine the question of reorganization of India. First, we had the Dar Commission. The Dar Commission of 1948. The mandate given to the Dar Commission by the Indian government was to examine whether linguistic reorganization of India is viable and feasible. The Dar Commission rejected the idea of linguistic reorganization by stating that this could harm the integrity of the nation, the unity of the nation. If we end up dividing administrative divisions on the basis of language, it could only promote regional tendencies which could weaken the federal polity and which could threaten our internal security as well. So Dar Commission was not in favor of linguistic reorganization. Then, to examine the recommendations of Dar Commission, the JVP committee was formed, which comprised of Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, etc. And the JVP committee also was not in favor of linguistic reorganization. So until 1952, until Potti Sriramulu began his hunger strike, there was no support for linguistic reorganization of India. But following Potti Sriramulu's death and the violent protests that engulfed Andhra, right, the region of coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema, that is what pushed the government to finally set up the first linguistic state by carving out these areas from the Madras Presidency. Then the Fazal Ali Commission was set up, the States Reorganization Commission. So the States Reorganization Commission would finally consider language as a basis for internal reorganization, and in 1956, its recommendations were accepted and implemented, which led to the creation of several linguistic states in India. So this would lead the princely state of Hyderabad, which had been annexed by India, to be merged with Rayalaseema and coastal Andhra to create the united state of Andhra Pradesh. So from 1956 till 2014, this region that you're seeing here was one state, the Andhra Pradesh state. So what I'm trying to say is that throughout history, there have been circumstances where the Telugu people have been politically divided and re-emerged as well. So in 2014, when the bifurcation was done, given the chaotic environment, the violence, the protests that were present, and the opposition from coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema for the bifurcation, it was anticipated that it would breed animosity between the Telugu people. But today, 10 years later, if you look back and introspect, no such animosity exists on the ground at least. Socially, it hasn't had any negative impact. Is that clear? But however, the writer says, if there is no animosity between the Telugu-speaking people, then what was the ground on which the people of Telangana protested for bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh? There must have been other reasons. Maybe some political reason, economic reason. If social division within the Telugu community was not the reason for the bifurcation, there must be other grounds on which the movement got triggered in early 2010, which eventually led to the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh. So this is where the writer raises a very, very important point. The writer talks about unmet political and economic demands of certain regions in the country. See, when it comes to reorganization of states, there is a constitutional provision, Article 3. Under Article 3, the Parliament of India is empowered to reorganize the states of India internally, to create a new state, to destroy an existing state, or to redraw the boundaries of existing states. These powers are entirely vested with the Parliament under Article 3. Now, state governments, of course, have no role to play in this. This power is vested with the Parliament and the centre. Now, in different regions of India, let's say there is a linguistic state. Let's say, for example, Karnataka or Maharashtra. Even in these linguistically organized states, where social linguistic unity is present, there could be political and economic differences in different parts of that particular state. Now, for example, if you look at Karnataka, I took the example of Karnataka because within Karnataka, there are different regions where you find different levels of socio-economic development. For example, if you go towards Hyderabad, Karnataka region, or if you look at northern parts of Karnataka, coastal Karnataka, and compare that with southern Karnataka, the levels of development vary from region to region. Especially North Karnataka and Hyderabad Karnataka, they suffer from relative backwardness. They have multiple issues and problems with regard to agriculture, industrialization, etc. Whereas coastal Karnataka and southern Karnataka are seen as more developed and progressive. So in the future, the writer is raising a very valid question that would these internal political economic differences lead to such demands as well in other states? See, right now we are under the assumption that language is enough to unite the people of a particular state. Since 1956, in fact since 1953, since Andhra was created, we have been under the assumption that language is enough, a regional language is enough to keep the people together, binded together without threatening the structure of the state. But bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana proved this assumption wrong. In Maharashtra as well, there are different regions with varied levels of development. Look at the Vidarbha Amravati belt. Compare that with Western Maharashtra. Right? Clearly within Maharashtra itself, even though Marathi is a uniting force for the people of Maharashtra, there are internal political and social and economic differences. So we can't always assume that linguistic reorganization was enough and we will not see any such demands coming up again. We can't be under that assumption. So that is why the writer is urging the Indian state and the people in general to carefully re-examine the reorganization of India and be better prepared to deal with such demands coming from different regions in the country. Even within a state, there could be internal differences. We can't assume that language is enough to bind them together, because if that was the case, the Telugu-speaking people of Telangana would have never raised a demand for a separate state. Correct? So if you examine the reasons why Telangana led this movement, why parties like TRS and its leaders like KCR, why would they give leadership to such a movement which would even turn violent? There were few historical factors, political and economic factors that led to this demand. And I'm going to discuss and examine this in the next article. We will look at the differences, the political economic differences between the Telangana region, coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema, which will help you understand why these demands came up. Why did this lead to a violent protest in 2010? What was the need to bifurcate the state of Andhra Pradesh? So the writer is saying that we should start anticipating this. We should be better prepared because such demands could come from anywhere in any other state. Maybe in West Bengal, maybe in Odisha, maybe in Tamil Nadu or in Karnataka as well. You never know. So that is a very valid point that the writer is raising here, which could even have serious political, security and social and even constitutional implications. The next important point being raised by the writer is the power and influence of the newly created states. Once a large state is bifurcated, obviously these new states, which are smaller in size, they may not be able to exercise the same political clout, especially at the national level. Now, for example, if you look at Andhra Pradesh, before 2014, before the bifurcation was done, it was the largest South Indian state. It had 45 seats in the Lok Sabha. So the size, the population of a state directly determines representation in the parliament. And also don't forget, the number of MPs being sent from a state will determine your political clout with the central government. This will play a direct role in your political economic influence. Those states which have more MPs in the parliament, which play a critical role in the formation of the central government, they will always exercise more influence in a federal polity. They would be able to corner most of the resources, natural resources, financial resources, and it would make the state politically prominent. But with the bifurcation, these things have changed for the region of Andhra Pradesh. Now, the newly created state of Andhra Pradesh, which only includes Rayalaseema belt and the coastal Andhra belt, it only has 25 MPs in the Lok Sabha. Telangana, the newly created state, it has just around 17 seats in the Lok Sabha. So clearly, the political influence of both the states has diminished. Right? This was bound to happen. Obviously, when the resources are divided, when the bureaucracy, police forces, right, when the administrative machinery was essentially divided between the two, naturally there would be a reduction in the representation of these states as well. And today, Andhra Pradesh is the third largest in South India. Telangana has fallen to the 5th position. So Tamil Nadu, Karnataka would rank above Andhra Pradesh as far as their political heft with the center in the parliament is concerned. So this has direct implications for the federal structure. It has implications for the distribution of resources, natural resources and financial resources to the newly created states. Now, Andhra Pradesh is not entirely happy with what happened in 2014, because Andhra Pradesh was left weaker with lesser resources. And the worst part is today Andhra Pradesh doesn't even have an official capital. Right? Hyderabad was a joint capital only till yesterday. So technically speaking, today Andhra Pradesh, as of today, has become a state without a capital. Hyderabad would be the capital of Telangana going forward. And local politics in Andhra Pradesh has further messed up the situation, because first Chandrababu Naidu came up with the Amravati plan, the plan to build a brand new capital. This led to a land rush. It had an impact on farmers and even on agricultural land in the Amravati region. But later, the YSR government dropped the plans and came out with a 3-capital plan, right? Using Amravati as a legislative capital only and setting up Visakhapatnam and Kurnool as the other 2 capitals for judicial and legislative and administrative purposes. But this plan also has not materialized. So today, Andhra Pradesh would be left without a capital, and this has very serious implications for governance in Andhra Pradesh. And also the power equations, the political power equations, the economic power equations between people of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. This has been a matter of concern. So the question here is, when you bifurcate a state, when smaller states are created from a larger state, they definitely lose their political heft. They lose their political clout. They will no longer enjoy the same degree of influence with the central government, and in a federal setup, they would lose their influence and their clout. So this would have implications for the development of the state as well. So allocation of resources to these states, access to natural resources, financial resources which are devolved by the center to the states would all get affected. And this eventually translates to economic challenges. Especially Andhra Pradesh is facing quite a set of challenges, and even Telangana is not entirely happy. As of now, Telangana is still riding that momentum that bifurcation itself was a big political success. But eventually the reality will sink in. Right? Within few years, you will notice that Telangana, as it struggles for resources, because largely industrialization is concentrated in the Andhra Pradesh region. Apart from Hyderabad, Telangana doesn't really have anything else to boast of. Most of the land in Hyderabad, especially precious land in Hyderabad and in the Telangana region, is owned by the Reddy community from Rayalaseema or the Kamma community from coastal Andhra. So politically, economically, socially, these differences that exist, right, this could have very serious implications down the line as well. And this is where the writer blames the then Manmohan Singh government as well for the faulty process through which the bifurcation was done. It was under pressure that the center went ahead and invoked the powers of Article 3 to reorganize Andhra Pradesh. Sufficient thought wasn't given to a fair division of resources, Of course, the administrative machinery, police forces, bureaucrats, they were all divided between Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. But there are legacy issues, lasting issues which have been left behind. So writer is asking a question here that should we have a better approach to deal with such demands? If at all a state has to be bifurcated, should we keep in mind these future consequences, political, economic and social consequences? So that is a very valid argument, and you can expect a mains question based on this. Given it's the 10th anniversary of the reorganization, in the mains, there can be a question like this. The questions that the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh threw up and the lessons the process of division offers cannot be parried or ignored. Critically examine the statement. Essentially, the first statement is stating that there were serious questions raised by the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh. It threw up some serious questions with regard to the constitutional provisions. There were political, economic, social questions raised. And even the process of division was not smooth. It has created even more problems. So what do you think about the questions raised by the bifurcation and the process of division? Could this have been handled better? Are there any lessons for any such future demands that might come up from other states? So that is what we need to examine. So based on what we discussed, I think you should be able to build an answer for this question. You can start with an introduction, briefly talking about the linguistic reorganization and how Andhra was the first linguistic state. Point out that linguistic reorganization was based on the assumption that language is sufficient enough to keep the people of a state united. But that wasn't the case with the people of Telangana, because people of Telangana had some valid demands. They had certain valid concerns regarding their political, economic, social well-being, as they felt that coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema were dominating in Andhra Pradesh. So the internal differences within the Telugu community was not really well addressed and handled. That is what led to the demand. So in the body, you can talk about all the serious questions that we raised, the political questions, possibility of similar demands arising in other states, right? Should we introspect our policy of reorganization on the basis of language? The economic challenges, the economic legacy that a bifurcation leaves behind, because the states will be weaker, politically weaker. They will be economically weaker with limited resources. So how will this affect the social fabric of the newly created states? So examine these aspects, and finally you can conclude your answer. You can conclude the answer by talking about the need to draw lessons from this experience. In the conclusion, you can suggest that there are lessons available by studying the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh and the implications it has had, or the future implications it is going to have. And we need to be mindful of all these challenges if ever similar demands come up from other parts of India. So I think that should be more than sufficient to do justice to the given question. Now let's look at this related column on page number 7. Here the writer is talking about the anger and the resentment or the discontent that has been left behind post the reorganization of Andhra Pradesh. So here the writer is mainly focusing on the internal divisions and the demands of the people that exist within Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Now let's examine this carefully. I told you earlier that during colonial rule, Telangana region, including today's Hyderabad, was a princely state under the Nizam. So politically, Telangana and Hyderabad region had become quite distinct, at least for a few centuries. Whereas coastal Andhra and also the Rayalaseema region, historically these areas have been under the same political social influence. Prior to colonial rule, prior to the Nizam, even Telangana was very much part of the same administrative setup. But following the emergence of a princely state and after Nizam ceded these areas to the British, the coastal Andhra region saw greater development. Given its access to the sea, given the presence of important ports in coastal Andhra saw faster growth and development, and we saw the formation of an elite community in coastal Andhra that is the Khammam community. The Khammam community is a very dominant, influential community in coastal Andhra. They constitute the elite. In fact, a number of industries in Andhra Pradesh and even in Telangana, especially in Hyderabad, a lot of precious land, very valuable real estate, is all owned by people of the Khammam community. In fact, many of the chief ministers of Andhra Pradesh have been from the Khammam community. Similarly, in Rayalaseema, there is one more community which is equally influential and powerful. I am referring to the Reddy community. The Reddys of the Rayalaseema are extremely influential from Hyderabad to Telangana to the Rayalaseema belt. They own a lot of land, lot of resources, and from coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema, there have been several ministers as well in the previous Andhra Pradesh governments. But this is where Telangana felt left out. Telangana always had a concern that it was not getting equal representation in the cabinet, within the government. It was not getting equitable allocation of resources. And many chief ministers have been from the Reddy community, just like from the Khammam community. So this leaves Telangana. It was found that Telangana was not being given a fair treatment. A sense of discrimination had crept in. And this existed from 1960s, 1970s itself. In fact, the strong demand that came up from the people of Telangana regarding this unequal treatment led to the introduction of something called the Mulki rules. It was a kind of a reservation which was provided in government jobs to the natives of Telangana people when it comes to government appointments. These Mulki rules were upheld by the Supreme Court as well. But this created resentment amongst the people of coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema because they felt like foreigners, they felt like outsiders. When internally within Andhra Pradesh, separate reservation kind of facility was provided to the natives of Telangana. So what I'm trying to say is that historically, these internal differences within the Telugu community has not been well handled by the political parties, by the leaders, and as well as by the center. That is the reason why the differences kept propping up every now and then. And eventually in late 2005, 2010, the tendency, the resentment increased in the Telangana belt. That is what triggered the statehood movement, which turned violent, extremely chaotic, and finally pressurized the center to bifurcate Andhra Pradesh. So before the bifurcation, if Telangana was angry and it had more resentment and discontent, now things are the other way around. Post bifurcation, it is coastal Andhra and Rayalaseema which has a lot of resentment and discontent because they essentially lost Hyderabad, right? With Hyderabad being the joint capital, and there is no future roadmap regarding the next capital of Andhra Pradesh. Plus, the Khammam and Reddy community, they would feel threatened because they have been the elites, they have been the dominant class. So now losing Hyderabad would be a massive economic hit as well, a political hit as well. So this has bred resentment amongst these other parts of Andhra Pradesh. So essentially, these internal differences have been aggravated post-bifurcation in the Andhra Pradesh region. So that is the reason why before bifurcation or whenever such demands come up, it's very important to carefully handle these sentiments. And the responsibility largely lies with the political leaders. The regional parties, the chief minister and the top political leaders from the communities, they have a bigger responsibility to ensure that these grievances, these questions of resentment are handled in the best possible manner. But in the case of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, this wasn't done. Right now, there is a political jubilation in Telangana that they succeeded in the statehood movement. But down the line, the limited representation they have in the parliament, the limited resources, the limited access to resources and infrastructure will start hurting the people economically and socially. In Andhra Pradesh as well, there are deep-rooted concerns, right? So without addressing these grassroots issues at the local level, at the state level, these aspects of resentment and discontent will never go away, right? So that is what we draw. These are the basic lessons we draw from the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh. Now let's look at a very important editorial from page number 6 related to international relations. This editorial is examining the impact of domestic electoral politics on India's foreign policy. The editorial is examining the electoral rhetoric of our political leaders and political parties, which are often made in the midst of elections, and how this could hurt India's national interests, how it can impact our foreign policy interests. It's a very interesting topic that this article brings up. It's a very small discussion, but there are some key points that we need to examine. See, during the campaign period of the 2024 general elections, we saw the political parties, especially the BJP, the Congress, and others as well, and their top leaders, making certain controversial statements regarding India's foreign policy, especially with our neighboring countries. This was largely designed to please the domestic electorate, just to polarize the voters, to impress the voters, and ensure that they can garner as many votes as possible. While this is understandable in the domestic context, political parties resort to rhetoric. That is what they specialize in, unfortunately. But however, whatever statements are made by our top leaders, by the different parties in India, this would be closely watched, observed by our international partners. Not just our neighbors, even the global powers. All the partners of India, all the good friends of India, they will keep an eye on India's elections, not just on the outcome, but they will also watch the statements being made, the rhetoric which is being brought out by various leaders and various parties. They will look at the promises they have made in their manifestos, because eventually they will be forced to act on it. If not on all the claims they have made, at least on some of them, right? They'll be forced to prove their point by acting on these claims, which could have geopolitical ramifications, which could adversely affect maybe our neighbors or global powers, and that could hurt India's relations with these countries. Now let me give you specific examples to justify the argument. For example, Prime Minister Modi and Foreign Minister Dr. Shankar, they raised the Kachativu island issue. Kachativu is a settled matter. It's a closed matter between India and Sri Lanka. Through the 1974-1976 maritime boundary agreements, India-Sri Lanka settled the international maritime boundary line. And while India gave up the claim on Kachativu, right, giving Sri Lanka sovereignty over Kachativu, India did get something else in return. One would be good relations, friendly ties with Sri Lanka, plus we got access to the Watch Bank, which is blessed with immense resources off the coast of Kanyakumari. So it was not that Kachativu was a lost cause, or it's not that India lost entirely. It was a well-calculated diplomatic move to trade off Kachativu for Watch Bank because there were benefits for India. But to reopen an old issue and to make false claims just because of elections, just because of political necessity, this could have implications on our ties with Sri Lanka. In fact, when PM Modi and Foreign Minister Jaishankar made these statements, right, they very well knew that the statements they were making is not factual. But yes, in politics, that's what happens. Same with the other parties as well, with Congress. I'll come to that. I'll come to other issues where Congress has tried to exploit international issues for domestic political gains. The problem is when our political leaders, that too those who are in position of power, right, and if they are from major parties like BJP or Congress, the statements they make will have a lot of weight. It might just be election rhetoric, but later there could be pressure on the parties to act on it. There could be a requirement, a political necessity to act on these claims and rhetorics that they have raised, which could harm our ties with our friendly partners. Sri Lanka criticized India when India made these claims. Not India, but when our leaders made these claims as part of the election campaign, Sri Lanka was critical of these statements where an attempt allegedly was being made to reopen an old settled issue. Now, similarly, the Congress tried to open up the land boundary agreement, which is another settled matter with Bangladesh. See, with Bangladesh, we always had a land boundary issue, also called the enclave issue. Due to the haphazard partition carried out by the British, there were many Indian enclaves left behind in East Pakistan, which later became Bangladesh. Similarly, there were many East Pakistani enclaves left behind in India, which later became Bangladeshi enclaves. Now, this land boundary question was never settled until recently. In 2015, the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act was enacted in the Parliament by the Modi government to give effect to the land boundary agreement, which provided for the exchange of the enclaves between India and Bangladesh and forever settled this long-standing issue. It brought a huge relief to the people who were trapped in these enclaves for decades without any access to development and welfare. All right, so now the Congress, as part of the election campaign, raised questions about the land boundary agreement and alleged that Modi government had gifted away land to Bangladesh. Just like Modi and Shankar were questioning the decisions of the Indira Gandhi government over giving away Kachativu to Sri Lanka, in a similar tone, Congress leaders were questioning the validity of the land boundary agreement and the intention behind giving away land to Bangladesh. Because in net terms, if you take the total area of both the enclaves of India and Bangladesh, India did lose some territory. That is the reason why constitutional amendment was necessary. Because India was ceding a part of the territory to Bangladesh, and hence constitutional amendment became necessary. But let me tell you what is ironic over here. In fact, the land boundary agreement was not finalized by the Modi government. It was actually finalized by the Manmohan Singh government. In the interest of India-Bangladesh relations, Manmohan Singh government had promised Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to deliver on the land boundary agreement. Because in 2009, when Sheikh Hasina became the PM, Sheikh Hasina worked with India, assisted India in tackling Northeast insurgency. Without the help of Sheikh Hasina's government, we couldn't have brought down many of the Northeast insurgent groups. Sheikh Hasina played a critical role in bringing down NSCN, NDFB, ULFA and other insurgent groups that were posing a credible security threat to India. Sheikh Hasina helped India in improving border security, reducing illegal migration. And the Manmohan Singh government wanted to return the favor by settling the Teesta issue, the Teesta water sharing issue, and also by settling the land boundary issue. The central government was all set to do this. The agreement was finalized. But what is ironic is that the BJP, which was then in the opposition during the UPA rule, strongly opposed the land boundary agreement. Because it was again domestic politics, even though it was in national interest. It was opposed by the opposition, which was primarily the BJP, and they accused the then UPA government of gifting away Indian territory to Bangladesh. The UPA government also was at fault because it was a coalition government. It didn't have enough numbers in the parliament to push through a constitutional amendment. It needed the support of the opposition. So domestic politics had derailed the land boundary agreement, and Bangladesh was upset with India. It was upset with the Manmohan Singh government as it couldn't deliver the land boundary agreement because the opposition parties led by BJP had derailed the initiative. So later, when Modi government came to power, the very same party which had opposed the deal in the opposition now went ahead and finalized the agreement, introduced the constitutional amendment, and we exchanged the enclaves as well. So irrespective of what has happened in the past, right, both parties have capitalized on it. But at least now, we shouldn't be in the habit of reopening these settled matters. Land boundary agreement is a settled issue. Kachativu Island is a settled issue. It's not that India gifted away territory, neither to Sri Lanka nor to Bangladesh. But opening up these old issues, deliberately raising questions over them, just for the sake of electoral politics, would harm India's interests in the long run because other countries would be watching India. This is just the tip of it. There have been many other disturbing developments. There are certain politicians in India who raised very controversial statements against Pakistan. Because whenever there is election season, Pakistan becomes the target. There were questions regarding POK, statements that India will occupy POK, right? As if the statement will have no international implication. And these statements were made by very senior leaders. Statements regarding Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, which of course is a security concern, but any loose statements could hurt India's interests in the long run. Statements by Indian leaders stating that we will hunt down terrorists anywhere in the world. Ghar mein ghus ke marenge. At a time when India was already being alleged by the international community of plotting assassinations around the world. So these statements might please the vote bank, right? The domestic voters feel very excited, happy when their leaders and parties are talking about international issues. It might get them some votes as well, polarize the electorate. But internationally, this could have deadly implications for India. Because other countries would be observing the political rhetoric. They would be taking note of what's happening. Tomorrow, if, let's say, there is an internal demand to act on some of these claims Obviously, this would harm our ties with friendly countries as well, and it could adversely affect our long-term foreign policy interests. So that is what we need to learn from this particular editorial. Even with regard to the China-India boundary dispute, the Galwan River Valley clashes, all these issues have been politicized, right? The Indian surgical strikes, after Uri attacks, after Pulwama attacks, the airstrikes we carried out, they have been used for political mileage. But when you start capitalizing on foreign policy issues and engage in political rhetoric in India, this could have external implications. It could adversely affect our ties with many countries, right? That is something we should be mindful of, especially the top leaders and the major political parties. They should be very mindful of the consequences. Because don't think international relations is not linked with domestic issues. In fact, there is a direct connection between what happens within the country and what happens outside the country. So based on this, you can anticipate certain questions like this. There could be a question in GS paper 2. Examine the implications of domestic political rhetoric on Indian foreign policy interests with examples. Straightforward question. So all you have to do is, in the introduction, explain the concept, explain the core concept that domestic issues are connected to external issues. Let's say, for example, any adverse economic development. Let's say Indian economy faces internal domestic challenges. This will obviously have an external impact. It will affect our foreign policy relations. Similarly, any adverse social developments. Let's say large-scale unrest. It could be an internal issue, but it will have foreign policy dimensions. It will affect our ties with other countries. Similarly, positive developments internally. Let's say India's economy is booming, right? Or let's say India is doing very well internally as far as social unity is concerned. This will always reflect positively in our foreign policy as well, right? So please bring out this connection. That would be the right introduction here. Clearly establish the link that exists between domestic developments and external developments. Then in the body, you can discuss these issues with examples without taking the names of any parties or any leaders. You don't have to name anyone. You don't have to name Indira Gandhi, Modi, Rahul Gandhi, anyone. Don't mention BJP or Congress. Just point out how domestic politics has often derailed our Indian foreign policy. From Kachativu issue to the way in which we dealt with the Tamil conflict, the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka, the inability of India to finalize the Teesta Water Agreement, the land boundary issue with Bangladesh, right? Bring out these examples and show how domestic polarization, right, and domestic political rhetoric has affected our foreign policy interests. Then finally, give a conclusion. Give a conclusion that our political parties and leaders have to be mindful of what they speak, of what they say, because this will be watched by our international partners. You can even quote the close friendship that existed between Nehru and Vajpayee, especially when it came to India's national interests. Even though Nehru and Vajpayee were from diametrically opposite sides of the political spectrum, on national interests they would align together. Not just Nehru and Vajpayee. In fact, India is probably the only country where we have sent opposition leaders to defend India's interests at the UN. Can you imagine that? Opposition leaders defending India's interests who have been sent by the government as the diplomats of the country. That has happened in the past. Because in the past, there has always been a collaboration between various parties on issues of national interest and foreign policy. Between Congress and BJP and all the other parties as well. Right? Irrespective of their ideology, irrespective of their internal differences and their domestic political fight, externally we would present a united face. But this has been destroyed in the last 10 to 15 years. The increasing polarization in Indian politics has had a deadly impact. So today government doesn't take the opposition on board. The opposition doesn't respect what the government is doing. So there are mistakes committed by both the sides which could adversely harm our interests in the long run. So conclude by stating that there is a need for all parties to come together on certain critical issues of national concern. Government has the responsibility to ensure that happens. The government is the one which should consult with all the parties, pave the way for such consultation. Opposition should also be open, right? It should be more open-minded to collaborate with the government on certain critical issues and take a common position. So that is the ideal conclusion for such a question. Next, another small editorial on page number 6 related to social issues, governance and security. This editorial is related to baby trafficking. This has emerged as a serious concern, a social concern, a security concern. Recently, the Telangana police, they busted a baby trafficking cartel. This has been a very disturbing development. According to Telangana police, they have cracked down on a criminal gang which was basically smuggling babies from Maharashtra, Delhi and other parts of India and selling them at a price in Telangana to childless parents. So babies from North India, West India, infants who are just few days old, few weeks old, they would be smuggled and sold in Telangana to childless couples, parents who are waiting for some way, either adoption or any other option available so that they could have a child of their own. Now this has become a deadly market, a black market, a mafia. Now the writer says that the editorial team of the Hindu, they say that to tackle the menace of baby trafficking, we need to address both the supply side problem and the demand side problem. Now what do you mean by this? See, the first question is, where is the supply of the babies coming from? Babies are not commodities to be traded, to be put a price on their head. It means that either the babies are stolen by criminal gangs, which is very likely, it does happen, where there is a collusion between some hospital staff. They might be working with criminal gangs, giving them access to hospitals where they might be stealing some of the babies. These incidents have been reported. But apart from that, there are parents selling their infants. Why? Because of extreme poverty. Due to extreme poverty, parents who have had a child, they're not able to look after the child, the family is under financial distress, so sometimes they don't hesitate to sell the child to these smuggling cartels. They might make a few thousand rupees, maybe a few lakh rupees. So there are instances where extremely poor families are forced to sell their children due to financial necessity, due to financial distress, right? So this is the supply side problem. One, you crack down on these groups. The police, the law enforcement agencies have to crack down on these organizations. Ensure that babies can't be stolen at any cost from hospitals. And more importantly, tackle poverty. Ensure that parents are not pushed to sell their children just because of financial distress. So you need socio-economic welfare in the long run to prevent this from happening on the supply side. Next is with the demand side. The question is, how come there is a demand for buying babies? Right? As if someone is buying a product or a commodity. People are ready to pay a price and buy a baby. Why is this happening? It's happening because childless couples, they have no hope left for them because of the complicated adoption laws in India. The process of adoption and the laws surrounding them, the regulations, have become very complicated. Prospective parents have to wait for 2-4 years, and even at the end, they may not get a child to adopt. So this pushes childless couples into desperation, and they fall prey to these smuggling cartels, and they get ready to pay a price for purchasing a baby. So they'll shell out few lakh rupees, and these middlemen, these criminals, they would make a killer profit. So to crack down on this illegal mafia which has developed, one, there should be strict security action, cracking down on these smuggling cartels. Next, supply side problems have to be fixed in the long run. Poverty and hospital security has to be improved. And more importantly, demand has to be taken out. Simplify the adoption rules. The process of adopting a kid should become simplified. Of course, the well-being of the adopted child should also be kept in mind. There should be checks and balances, but it shouldn't lead to inordinate delays or indefinite delays. Childless couples, they can't wait for 2, 4, 5 years without a possible answer. So simplifying the adoption regime in India could address the demand side problem, and it could reduce the demand for the purchase of babies. So this is a critical issue, a security issue, and of course a social issue as well, which has to be tackled on priority. Next, we have another important article on page number 4, which is related to an outfit, a socio-religious group from Jammu and Kashmir called Jammat-e-Islami. I don't know how many of you have heard about this. In fact, UPSC had already asked a mains question related to Jammat-e-Islami. So I'm not saying the topic will repeat, but I'm just trying to give you an idea how you can pick newspaper articles, anticipate questions, right? We'll discuss the PYQ as well, so that you know what kind of questions have been asked. So there could be related questions, because the topic is connected to OGWs, overground workers. In 2019, the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is responsible for counter-terrorism, internal security, it banned this organization in Jammu and Kashmir called Jammat-e-Islami, a socio-religious group. It was banned by the MHA by declaring it as a OGW, overground worker. So immediately after this, UPSC asked a question, a 10-mark direct question in 2019 mains. What was the question? The banning of Jammat-e-Islami in Jammu and Kashmir brought into focus the role of overground workers, or OGWs, in assisting terrorist organizations. Examine the role played by OGWs in assisting terror groups in insurgency-affected areas. Discuss the measures needed to neutralize the influence of OGWs. That was the question. So who are OGWs? That's what you need to understand. Why was Jammat-e-Islami banned by the Home Ministry under the UAPA? UAPA, or Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. It is the anti-terrorism law of India, the primary anti-terror law of India. So Jammat-e-Islami, which is a socio-religious group, was essentially held responsible for aiding, supporting acts of terrorism and insurgency in the Kashmir Valley. That is the reason why it was banned as a OGW under UAPA. So let's understand a little more about these OGWs. Who are OGWs? What do they do? Why is it a challenge when it comes to countering terrorism? Overground workers are those who are essentially functioning in the open. They are not hiding, they are not terrorists by themselves, right? They are not radical extremists by themselves, but they might be extending support directly or indirectly to terrorists and insurgents. Now see, India has many conflict zones. We have the Naxal corridor, we have the northeast of India, which has seen multiple insurgencies, Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab as well, which was hit by the Khalistan movement in the 80s. In all these 4 conflict zones of India, we have seen that several insurgent groups and terrorist groups, which are actually involved in the acts of terrorism and violence, they have received overground support, directly or indirectly, by individuals and groups and organizations. Let's say, for example, just for example, there could be a teacher who is leading a normal life, a mainstream life, not involved in any terrorist activity, not a radical by themselves, but they sympathize with the cause. They have some resentment against the state, they identify with the extremists and they sympathize with the extremist movement. But they are too scared to get directly involved. So this teacher, let's say in a conflict zone, might give some kind of indirect support to terrorists or insurgents. He might accommodate terrorists in his house, tell everyone that they are guests, relatives, and give shelter to the insurgents as they sit there and plan attacks. Or someone might provide funds to terrorists and insurgents, or arrange weapons for them, arrange vehicles for them, or help them in spreading their propaganda. Or there could be others who have a radical motive, who have a radical inclination, but they are too scared to take part in the actual attack. They might directly enable the attack. They could directly help in reconnaissance, in target acquisition, in identifying a target, in assembling a bomb, or in procuring vehicles, right? Or in taking part directly in the planning of the attack itself. So those who are extending such direct or indirect support from the outside, without themselves being directly involved in the terror attack, they are called OGWs. They are labeled by our security forces as OGWs, overground workers. In the Northeast, we have seen many such examples where few individuals or few so-called social organizations or NGOs, they could be providing some kind of support, maybe material support, logistical support, financial support, or direct support in planning and executing an attack. So we have seen this in the Naxal corridor as well, in Jammu and Kashmir as well, in Punjab as well. Now, the question is, how do you deal with them? You can't just brand them as terrorists, right? Because they themselves might not have been involved directly in the act of terrorism. But logistically, materially, financially, they might be giving some kind of support. So it's very essential to treat OGWs as a separate category. So what Indian forces have done, especially in J&K, the Indian Army has a policy towards OGWs. Informal policy is in place. Those OGWs who only give limited indirect support, they are not targeted by the forces. They are often held for questioning. They are given a warning and they are let off, but they are kept under surveillance. No further action is taken against them because they haven't done anything wrong or they haven't really taken part in any kind of direct support to an act of terrorism. But there could be someone who might have given funds, who might have sheltered terrorists, who might have helped in arranging weapons or in arranging vehicles which were used for an attack. So such OGWs will be targeted by the forces. They will be arrested. They will be punished according to the law. There could be another set of OGWs which are only acting like a front, like Jammat-e-Islami was doing. Jammat-e-Islami was supposed to be a social-religious organization involved in student activity, etc. But it had emerged as a front for extremist activities where members of Jammat-e-Islami were in direct collusion with separatist and terrorist groups. In that case, the group itself can be banned under UAPA as another extremist terrorist organization. So such a graded action can be taken by the Indian government and the Indian forces while dealing with overground workers. So that is the response, that is the threat posed by them. So if you can bring this out in a proper structure, that would be more than sufficient for this question. So you should have awareness as to who are OGWs. It can be an individual, it can be a group, right? So anyone who is providing some kind of support, direct or indirect support, gets classified as a OGW. Now we come to the prelims section. We have two small articles and we can wrap up the session after that. On the last page of the science and tech section, the supplement page, the second supplement page, we have an article referring to the Tonga volcano. There has been a very interesting study regarding a recent eruption that happened at Tonga. So first let's understand where Tonga is located, where is this volcano exactly located, and then we'll understand the findings of this new research. See, in 2022, 2 years ago, some of you might remember as well, there was a deadly underwater volcanic eruption. Tonga is a country in South Pacific, right? It's in the Oceania region to the east of Australia. You can see Australia here. So this is where the small Pacific island nation of Tonga is located. So off the coast of Tonga, underwater in the South Pacific, there is an underwater volcano called the Hunga Tonga. Hunga Tonga is the name of this underwater volcano which erupted in 2022. There was a massive eruption. It triggered a tsunami alert as well. Across the South Pacific, from Australia to New Zealand and across all these Pacific Island nations, a tsunami alert was issued when this massive underwater volcano had erupted in 2022. Now, a new study has pointed out that the Tonga volcano, which erupted in 2022, it has had a long-lasting impact on global weather and climate. So let's understand how. See, generally, when there is a volcanic eruption, right, let's say the volcano is on land. For example, in Indonesia, there are many volcanoes which are present on the same Pacific Ring of Fire. By the way, that's another important point. The reason why Tonga is vulnerable and why volcanic activity is present here underwater is because this region is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is one of the most active tectonic zones. So this entire belt, the Pacific Ring of Fire, is a hub of volcanoes, earthquakes, etc. So let's say a volcano on land erupts, like for example, Mount Batur in Indonesia, Mount Merapi in Indonesia. So if such overland volcanoes erupt, what will happen? highly toxic gases and particulate matter will be released, especially oxides of sulfur would be released in massive quantity. So a lot of toxic gases, particulate matter containing aerosols, right, they would be thrown into the atmosphere. Large quantities of sulfur dioxide will be released in such cases, which can engulf the region and maybe a large part of the world. So because of this, what will happen? The sunlight could be cut off. Solar insolation reaching the earth could be cut off, leading to a drop in temperature. In fact, a mega volcano can even bring a long-lasting winter. Is that clear? So generally, when volcanoes on land erupt, since they release gases, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, this can engulf the atmosphere, cut off solar insolation, and if it is massive enough, it can almost cover the entire region or maybe even a large part of the world, which can drastically bring down the temperatures, the global temperature, leading to long-lasting winters, lasting decades or centuries. So that would be an apocalyptic event. But if an underwater volcano explodes, the reaction is completely different. It's almost the opposite. If on-land volcano leads to a winter, underwater volcano leads to increase in temperature. How? Because when underwater volcano explodes, water vapor will start entering the atmosphere. Because the gases will not escape. Since it's underwater volcano, the particulate matter gases will not escape. But the heating up of the water throws up a lot of water vapor into the atmosphere. And don't forget, water vapor is a major greenhouse gas. Water vapor is a major greenhouse gas. It can contribute to global warming. So increased water vapor concentration in the atmosphere, especially in the upper reaches of the stratosphere, can lock more heat in the atmosphere, leading to warming of the atmosphere and warming of the world. Studies have shown that the Tonga volcano that exploded in 2022 caused a slight jump in the global temperature by around 0.015 degrees Celsius. Because it threw up a lot of water vapor over the months that trapped more heat as it is a greenhouse gas, leading to the rise in temperatures. And also, it contributed to the increase in ozone hole in the Antarctic. Researchers predicted that the Tonga volcanic eruption will accelerate ozone hole formation in the Antarctic because the water vapor that entered the polar stratosphere, it disturbed the ozone formation and destruction cycle, which is a natural cycle of equilibrium. So it disturbed the formation of ozone in the polar stratosphere, leading to the formation of a significant ozone hole, which had been predicted by the researchers as well. So such underwater volcanoes can have a deadly impact. They can contribute to global warming by releasing water vapor into the stratosphere, and in the polar stratosphere, the water vapor can meddle with the ozone cycle, leading to enlargement of the ozone hole. So studies are predicting that the Tonga volcano will have a slight impact on the weather in Australia, in United States, and also in the Europe region. So even regions as far away as the Atlantic and the European region could face weather and climatic changes because of one underwater volcanic eruption. So that is what we learned from this article. Then finally, on the same page, the Hindu carries a very important image, a very interesting image with some interesting facts that can be very important for our prelims. You can see a small fern in this image over here. This image is basically depicting a fern. Ferns usually grow on ground, on the surface, or sometimes they grow on tree barks which have fallen as well. So one unique fern which is found again in the South Pacific, in New Caledonia. You might have heard about New Caledonia. It's in the same region, by the way. Just below Tonga, you have New Caledonia. It's actually a French territory. It's not a separate country. It's an overseas French territory. It belongs to France. So in New Caledonia in the South Pacific, there is a unique fern which grows here called the New Caledonian Fern. Now, why is this in news? It is in news because genomic studies have established that this is the organism which has the largest genome sequence amongst all living organisms. So can you understand the significance of this? If you basically take its DNA structure present in the nucleus of every cell, it is 50 times larger than the DNA present in human cells. That is the difference. So if there is a question, which organism has the largest genomic sequence or the largest DNA presence in the nucleus of a cell, it is the New Caledonian Fern, found only in New Caledonia and also in the neighboring island of Vanuatu. Vanuatu is another South Pacific country. So in New Caledonia and Vanuatu, this is where the fern grows. It grows on the surface or also on the tree barks that have fallen, right? It has the largest genomic sequence known to us amongst all the organisms, amongst all plants, animals, humans. New Caledonia fern has the largest genomic sequence. It has 50 times more DNA packed into its nucleus compared to human cells and the human DNA. So with this, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope it's been an interesting, useful session. Do let me know what you think in the comments. And if you understood everything, please like the video, share the video with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So that is it for today. We'll see you tomorrow. And also don't forget to join us live at 7 p.m. today, because we are going to discuss and analyze mock test number 3. So that is it for now. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.